16 months after Craig Bennett laughed at the old plow, he saw a line that reached past the main gate of the Wayne County Farm Field Day. Some men had come in buggies and others in pickup trucks. They were farmers from Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky, and each one held the same yellow order card. At the front of the line stood Eli Stoltzfus, an Amish blacksmith with a straw hat and soot on his sleeves. Beside him was the plow Craig had called useless. It had no motor, and it was not covered in bright paint. 2 horses simply pulled it through the dark Ohio soil. The plow cut one straight furrow after another. It did not jump or sink, and the farmer behind it did not have to fight the handles. Craig looked at the order book in Eli's hand. How many? Eli turned one page, then another. 72 so far. Craig stopped smiling.
Want to know what happens next? Subscribe now and stay with us.
If you have ever watched a quiet person get laughed at because he works in an old way, subscribe to the channel now. This story is not about refusing the future. It is about seeing something useful that the modern world forgot. To understand why those farmers were waiting, we need to go back 16 months to a cold farm auction in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, in early 2024. Eli was 36. He lived with his wife, Hannah, and their 3 children on a small farm near Gap. His blacksmith shop stood across the lane from their white house. A diesel engine outside turned a shaft that powered his drill press and metal saw. This allowed Eli to run a serious workshop without connecting it to the public electric lines, in keeping with the rules of his local Amish church district. He repaired wagon parts, gates, horseshoes, and old farm tools. But that winter had been difficult. Steel cost more, customers paid late, and money saved for the leaking shop roof had gone to a sick mare and a broken well pump. On the first Saturday in March, Eli went to a farm auction with $400 in his coat. He hoped to buy a box of bolts and 2 iron wagon wheels. Instead, he found 3 piles of old plow parts behind the auction barn. There were beams, wheels, blades, and curved steel boards covered with rust. A red sign above them said, "Scrap implement parts, sold as 1 lot." Eli walked around the piles twice. Under a bent seat, he found the frame of an old horse-drawn plow. He rubbed the rust from its metal plate until he could read the name. Keystone Ridge Equipment, 1934. The company had been gone for many years, but the frame was still solid. Planning to open a museum? Craig Bennett stood behind him. Craig was 49 and owned Bennett Farm Supply, a large dealership beside the highway. He sold tractors, modern plows, and new parts. Craig kicked one of the old wheels. "That pile is finished. Even the scrapyard may not want it." Eli rubbed the old nameplate with his thumb. "The steel is still here." "The steel, maybe. The business is gone." Craig walked toward 2 other dealers and told them the Amish blacksmith was about to buy the 20th century 1 broken piece at a time. The first bid was $25. Eli raised his hand. Craig called out 50 just to make the crowd laugh, so Eli offered 75. Craig stopped there. He did not want the parts. He only wanted the joke. Eli bought all 3 piles for $75. By Monday, people were already talking. One farmer said the old plows pulled like tree stumps. Craig drove past and called through his open window, "If you build one, paint my name on it. I want people to know who warned you." That evening, Hannah opened their account book on the kitchen table. "We have $211 left in the repair fund," she said. "Do you really believe there is a working plow in those piles?" Eli looked through the window toward the dark shop. "I believe there is a question." Hannah closed the book, then answered it without losing the farm. For 6 weeks, Eli handled repair work by day and studied the old pieces after supper. He measured each useful part and drew it in a small paper book. The old Keystone Ridge frame was different from the others. Its main beam was shorter, and its wheel stood closer to the blade. That would make it easier to turn at the end of a narrow field. Eli knew many small farmers who still worked with horses. New equipment was often too large or too costly, while old equipment was cheaper but hard to repair. If he could rebuild this design with safe, new steel, he might solve a real problem. His father, Daniel, came to the shop one rainy morning. At 68, he had farmed with horses all his life and remembered an uncle using this model. It was light, Daniel said, but the grown men blamed it whenever the field was crooked. He chose the best frame and made a new cutting blade. He repaired the wheel, shaped 2 handles from ash wood, and added a new chain for the horse team. While sorting the last box, he also found 6 curved iron plates. Each one was as long as his hand and had a row of worn holes. The rough end of each plate looked broken. Eli could not find a place for them on the frame. Daniel guessed they were parts from an old seat, so Eli put them in a box under the bench. By the first week of May, the prototype was ready. Eli had spent $186 on steel, bolts, wood, and paint. He called it Test Number 1. Moses King, a local dairy farmer, offered a field behind his barn. Word of the test spread, and 23 people came to watch. Craig arrived with 2 salesmen and a box of coffee. "This will be good," Craig said. Eli hitched a calm Belgian horse named Chester to the plow. Moses held the lines while Eli took the handles. For the first 20 yards, the machine worked. Its blade entered the ground, and the curved steel board turned a clean ribbon of soil to the side. Then the plow began to rise. The furrow went from 7 inches deep to 2. Eli pushed down, but the blade suddenly dove. The handle struck his arms, and the plow turned toward the horse's legs. "Stop!" Moses pulled the lines, and Chester stopped at once. Eli moved the hitch chain and tried again. In one position, the blade stayed too close to the surface. In another, it buried itself so deep that Chester could hardly move it. On the 3rd try, one of the wooden handles cracked. The test was over. Craig walked into the field with his coffee. 90 years old, and now we know why nobody kept making it. He pointed toward his truck, which carried a large picture of a new tractor. "Farmers need equipment they can trust, Eli, not a history lesson." Eli said nothing. He unhitched Chester, thanked Moses, and took the failed machine home. That evening, mud covered his boots, and his arms hurt from fighting the handles. Hannah brought soup to the shop and found him looking at the broken piece of ash wood. "How bad?" "It will not hold the same depth." "Can you fix it?" Eli looked toward the bent furrow beyond the door. "I do not know." He had spent almost all their repair money, and Craig had been right about one thing. A farmer had to trust his plow. If the blade changed direction without warning, it could hurt a horse or the person holding it. Eli tied a paper tag to the frame. "Unsafe. Do not use." For 9 days, he did not touch it. Have you ever worked hard on something, only to watch it fail in front of the people who doubted you? If you believe failure can teach more than mockery, subscribe to the channel. Eli's first plow had failed, but that crooked furrow had left him one small clue. On the 10th morning, Eli returned to Moses King's field. As he walked along the first test furrow, he noticed that the changes in depth had not been random. The plow had risen whenever Chester crossed a high place and had sunk whenever the horse stepped onto lower ground. That meant the horse and the blade were not the problem. The trouble came from the angle between them. Eli drew a line in the wet soil with his finger. The idea was easy to understand. If a person pulled a knife flat across a loaf of bread, it would slide over the top. If the handle was lifted, the point would cut down. The plow worked in much the same way, but it had no good way to hold that angle when the ground changed. Back in the shop, Eli studied the front of the old frame again. Near the beam were 2 empty bolt holes. Around the lower hole, He saw a pale curve under the rust, as if something had moved there for many years. He searched every box until he found the 6 curved plates with rough ends. When he held one against the beam, the bolt holes and the pale mark matched. The row of worn holes formed a small path above the hitch chain. The plate was not part of a seat, and it was not useless scrap. It was a forgotten depth control. By placing a pin through different holes, a farmer could raise or lower the place where the horses pulled on the plow. That small change kept the blade at the right angle. Even the rough end made sense. It had been shaped that way to move past the beam, not broken in an accident. People had thrown the plates away because they did not understand what they were seeing. Eli had almost done the same. Daniel stared at the piece and slowly nodded. That is why my uncle's plow worked some days and fought him on others. This part must have been lost. Eli did not use the old plate because the iron was weak. Instead, he copied its shape in new steel, drilled 6 clean holes, and built a strong pin that could not shake loose. Beside the holes, he stamped simple numbers for soft, normal, and hard ground. 2 days later, he returned to the field with Hannah, Daniel, and Moses. There was no crowd this time, and no dealer drinking coffee by the fence. Eli placed the pin in the middle setting. Chester began to walk, and the blade entered the soil. It stayed there for 100 yards, leaving a straight furrow almost exactly 7 inches deep. At the far end, Eli moved the pin 1 hole for softer ground. The next furrow matched the first. Moses checked 5 places with a ruler, then looked at Eli. "Build me one." "This is only the second test." "Then you can test mine next." Hannah opened the small account book she had carried from the house. "How much will he pay?" That night, Eli set the sale price at $1,285. Moses gave him a $300 deposit. It was the first order. Eli did not rush into production. 3 more summer tests in clay, loose soil, and on a hillside revealed small problems. He changed the wheel spacing, made the handles adjustable, and added a wide ring so the control pin could be moved while wearing gloves. By October, 6 plows were working on 6 farms. None had lost its depth, and none had placed a horse in danger. The farmers liked that the machine was light and could be repaired with common bolts. Moses called the curved control plate the little piece that tells the plow how to behave. Eli named the finished model the Steady Furrow 1. Hannah had plain cards printed and mailed them to feed stores and small farm papers. Then winter came, and the orders stopped. Snow covered the fields. Steel prices rose again, and 2 buyers asked for their deposits, back after losing money on milk. By January, the account book showed only $87 of free cash. 6 finished plows stood in the shed with no buyers. Craig heard about the trouble and came with an offer. His dealership would buy all 6 plows for less than their cost, but he wanted the design, the name, and control of future sales in the county. "You said no farmer would trust it," Eli said. "You want the depth control." Craig tapped the paper. "I want a product I can improve. You have unsold machines and no money." Eli gave the offer back. "Then I have 6 machines and no money." Craig put on his gloves. Pride is expensive. So is selling something before you know its value. After Craig left, Hannah added the unpaid bills again. They could last 5 weeks. 3 days later, a letter arrived from Ohio. Samuel Weaver, a horse farmer who helped run the Wayne County Farm Field Day, had seen one of Eli's cards and heard from a test farmer. He invited Eli to demonstrate the machine before hundreds of small farmers. The event was 6 months away, so Eli took more repair work and built plows only after receiving deposits. A few orders came from Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Indiana. By June, all 6 plows in the shed had sold. The roof still leaked, but every bill had been paid. Then rain fell across Ohio for 4 days before the field event. Heavy wheels made deep tracks, and several sellers canceled their tests. Samuel called and warned that Eli might travel all that way without getting a chance to plow. Eli looked at the curved control plate on the machine beside him. "Bad ground is why I built it." A hired driver took Eli, Daniel, and 2 plows to Ohio. On the morning of the event, they found Craig beside the main tent. His dealership was showing a large tractor plow. "You came a long way to get stuck in Ohio mud," Craig said. Eli looked toward the test field. The horses came farther. At noon, mud packed around the blades of a large machine and forced its driver to stop. A smaller horse plow sank near the wet center and had to be pulled free. Samuel turned to Eli. "Do you still want to go?" "Yes." Before we return to the line from the beginning, subscribe if you enjoy victories earned through patience instead of luck. Eli was about to test his plow in the worst soil of the day in front of the dealer, who had tried to buy it for less than it cost. Eli hitched the steady furrow one behind a team of Belgian horses. He set the control pin for soft ground, and a local farmer took the lines. The horses moved. The blade entered the wet soil, while the curved board beside it lifted and turned the earth in one clean strip. Halfway across the field, the ground became firm. Eli stopped, moved the pin 2 holes, and started again. The depth didn't change. At the far fence, Samuel pressed a ruler into the furrow. It measured 7 inches. He checked the wet center and the hard end. Both were nearly the same. The crowd moved closer. On the next pass, the farmer held the handles with one hand. "It is not fighting me," he said. A man in a blue cap asked the price. When Eli told him, the man walked to Hannah's small table and signed a yellow order card. Another farmer stepped behind him, and then another. Within 10 minutes, the line reached past the main gate. This was the line Craig saw. Farmers from Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky, waiting to order the plow he had called a museum piece. By sunset, Hannah had entered 72 orders into the book. The deposits totaled $21,600. Eli promised no fast delivery. He told every customer that his shop could build only 6 plows a month and that each order would be made in the order received. Not one farmer left the line. Craig approached after the last test and asked to carry the plow in his store. Eli did not insult him or raise the price for revenge. He offered the same fair terms he would later offer 2 other dealers, but the design and the name would remain his. Before Craig left, Eli handed him one of the old curved plates. "Put this above your desk." "Why?" "So you remember that a part can look broken when you do not know what it does." During the next year, Eli hired 4 men from his community, repaired the shop roof, and built a larger test field behind the barn. By the end of the second year, 143 steady furrow plows were working across 4 states. Under each new frame, Eli stamped a short line, inspired by the Keystone Ridge plow of 1934. He kept the original rusty frame in the shop. When visitors asked why he had not restored it, he gave the same answer: because it failed first. That failure had shown him the missing angle. The broken-looking plate had shown him the answer, and the people who laughed had forced him to test every claim before asking a farmer to trust his work. The old plow did not become useful simply because it was old. It became useful because Eli respected the lesson hidden inside it. Sometimes progress is not a race away from the past. Sometimes it begins when one person stops, looks closely, and picks up the small piece everyone else threw away. If this story reminded you of someone whose work was mocked before it was understood, tell us about that person in the comments. Share the story with someone rebuilding after a failure, and subscribe for more stories about quiet people who find value where others see only rust.
If this story moved you, subscribe now and join us for the next one.